The organization had reached the point where there was no longer any reason to pretend that the recruits were preparing for an ordinary assignment. The men had spent days training under strict supervision. They had been tested for endurance, discipline, obedience, and their willingness to follow instructions without asking unnecessary questions. Every exercise had been presented as preparation for a dangerous but honorable mission. Now the truth was beginning to emerge. Barnaby had already discovered enough to understand that the operation was connected to Richard Longwood. Longwood was not a soldier. He was not a field commander. He was a wealthy businessman who operated in a world where money could open doors that ordinary people never even knew existed. He had interests abroad, political connections, and a strong belief that the future of certain countries could be shaped by the right combination of money and pressure. The recruits knew almost nothing about him. To them, he was simply one of the people paying for the operation. That was exactly how the organization wanted it. A recruit did not need to know who was behind the plan. He only needed to know what to do next. Barnaby understood that this was the most dangerous part of the entire operation. The men were being separated from the consequences of their decisions. They were told that they were serving a greater purpose. They were told that they were helping people. They were told that the mission was necessary. But none of them had been given the complete story. Without the complete story, they could not judge what they were actually participating in. Barnaby watched the men preparing their equipment. Some were confident. Some were nervous. Lobo looked particularly uncomfortable. He had entered the organization hoping to prove himself. Now he seemed to understand that proving yourself was not the same as knowing what you were proving. Barnaby approached him quietly. "You all right?" Lobo nodded, then shook his head. "I do not know anymore." Barnaby understood. "Good." Lobo looked at him. "Good. It means you are thinking." Lobo gave a nervous laugh. "I thought thinking was what got people into trouble around here. Only when they asked the wrong people." Lobo smiled. But his smile disappeared quickly. "Do you know what we are really doing?" Barnaby looked around before answering. "I know enough to be concerned." Lobo lowered his voice. "I heard something." "What?" "They are not sending us overseas." Barnaby said nothing. "They're saying the operation is here." Barnaby already knew. But hearing another recruit confirm it made the situation more immediate. Lobo continued. "I thought we were going somewhere else." So did many of them. "What are we supposed to do?" Barnaby looked at him. "Make sure you do not do anything you cannot live with afterward." Lobo stared at him. That answer frightened him more than any direct warning could have. The organization did not want recruits who asked moral questions. It wanted obedience. Barnaby knew that. He also knew that once the mission began, stopping it would become much harder. Outside the compound, Betty continued following the trail. The telephone records had become more useful than anyone expected. One number led to another. One conversation revealed another connection. Eventually, the name Longwood appeared repeatedly. Betty began examining his business activities. At first, everything seemed legitimate. Oil investments, international contracts, political meetings, charitable donations, travel arrangements. Nothing obviously connected him to a mercenary organization, but the pattern mattered. Longwood had been communicating with people who had no obvious reason to know one another. A businessman, a political advisor, a military contractor, a foreign official, and several men whose names appeared nowhere in ordinary business records. Betty began writing the names down. She connected them. Slowly, a network appeared. The network was not large, but it was organized. And at its center was Longwood. Betty took the information to Barnaby's colleagues. They realized that the private military organization was not operating independently. Someone was paying for it. Someone was choosing the targets. Someone was deciding where the recruits would go. The investigation was no longer simply about Danny Corman. It had become a race to determine exactly what Longwood intended to accomplish. Meanwhile, Danny was facing his own crisis. He had been trying to convince himself that the work was temporary. He had told himself that the money would solve his problems. He had told himself that once Kate was healthy and the bills were under control, he would return home. But every day inside the organization had made that promise more difficult to believe. He had seen how easily men could become numbers. He had seen how quickly personal loyalty could be replaced by orders. And now he understood that the operation was not what he had been promised. Danny had not joined because he wanted anyone harmed. He had joined because he believed he could earn enough money to save his marriage. The distinction mattered to him. Perhaps it would not matter to the organization.
But it mattered to him.
He thought about Kate constantly. He remembered her sitting at the kitchen table with medical bills spread before her. He remembered the way she had tried to hide her fear. He remembered how often she had told him that they would find a way. He had wanted to believe her. Instead, he had decided that he had to become the person who found the way. That decision had brought him into the organization. Now it was the thing preventing him from returning home. Barnaby noticed the change in Danny. The man who had once seemed determined now looked exhausted. Barnaby found an opportunity to speak with him alone. You have to stop blaming yourself. Danny shook his head. I brought myself here. You were trying to help Kate. That does not make it right.
No.
Barnaby paused. But it explains it. Danny looked at him. There was a difference. Barnaby was not excusing Danny's choices. He was trying to understand them. That was important. People often believed that understanding a mistake meant approving of it. It did not. Understanding allowed someone to learn. Danny lowered his eyes. I should have talked to her. Yes. I should have told her how scared I was. Yes. I thought she would think I was weak. Barnaby smiled sadly. Most people who love you would rather know that you are afraid than discover that you disappeared. Danny gave a quiet laugh. That sounds like something Kate would say. She is probably right. Danny smiled. For the first time in days, he looked almost like himself. Then the door opened. Both men turned. An instructor stood there. Corman. Danny stood. Barnaby. Barnaby followed him. The operation was about to begin. They were given their instructions. The recruits were told that the political leader would be attending a private meeting. The operation would take place in Los Angeles. They were to remain together. They were not to question their orders. They were not to contact anyone outside the organization. The recruits listened. Some appeared excited. Others appeared frightened. Barnaby watched their faces. He wondered how many truly understood what they were about to become part of. Then he looked at Danny. Danny looked back. Neither spoke. They did not need to. Both understood that time was running out. Outside, Betty had finally discovered the connection she needed. Richard Longwood had arranged a meeting. The meeting was with the very political figure the organization intended to target. Betty immediately realized what that meant. Longwood was not merely financing the operation. He was close enough to the target to know where he would be. That knowledge was valuable. It also meant that the operation was likely to happen sooner than expected. The authorities were notified. But there was a problem. Without direct evidence, they could not simply arrest everyone connected to Longwood. The organization had been careful. Its members used false names. Its communications were limited. Its headquarters had changed locations. The entire structure had been designed to disappear if necessary. Barnaby was still inside.
He was the best chance they had.
But he was also in the greatest danger. Betty knew it. She wanted to bring him out. Barnaby refused. He understood that leaving now might mean losing the only opportunity to stop the operation. The authorities reluctantly agreed to continue. Barnaby prepared himself. He checked his equipment. He reviewed the plan. He watched the recruits. One of them approached him. Do you think we are really doing something important? Barnaby looked at him. What do you think? The man hesitated. I thought so. And now? I do not know. Barnaby nodded. That is probably the most important question you have asked. The man looked away. The organization had created an environment in which doubt was treated as weakness. Barnaby believed the opposite. Doubt could be a warning. Sometimes doubt was the mind telling you to stop. The recruits were moved into position. The city outside remained completely unaware of what was happening.
People were shopping.
Cars were moving through traffic. Families were eating dinner. The ordinary rhythm of life continued. That was what made the situation so strange. Inside a small group of buildings, men were preparing for a political operation. Outside, nobody knew. Barnaby looked through the window. He thought about Kate.
He thought about Danny.
He thought about how easily ordinary people could become trapped inside extraordinary circumstances. Then he thought about Longwood. The wealthy businessman had created this situation from a distance. He would not be standing beside the recruits. He would not experience their fear. He would not be the one making the difficult decisions. He had money. Money created distance. And distance sometimes made it easier to convince yourself that other people were responsible for the consequences. Barnaby intended to change that. The operation began moving forward. The recruits gathered. Danny stood among them. Barnaby stayed close. Lobo looked nervous. One of the instructors gave the final instructions. The men moved. Barnaby knew that there would soon be no easy way to stop what was happening. Then something unexpected occurred. One of the recruits became ill. The man had been struggling for several days. Now he could no longer continue. The operation had to be adjusted. The organization delayed part of its plan. Barnaby recognized the opportunity immediately. A delay could mean everything. It could give Betty enough time to reach the authorities. It could give the authorities enough time to locate the organization. It could give Danny another chance. But delays were dangerous. The men were already suspicious of one another. Any sign of hesitation could attract attention. Barnaby remained calm. He spoke to Danny quietly. "Stay close." Danny nodded. Lobo joined them. "What is happening?" Barnaby looked at him. "We have more time." "How much?" "Not enough." Lobo swallowed. Barnaby continued. "Listen carefully." The three men stood together. Barnaby explained what he could. He could not reveal everything. But he wanted Lobo to understand one thing. When the moment comes, you have to make your own decision. Lobo stared at him. "What if I make the wrong one?" Barnaby answered quietly. "Then learn from it." Lobo nodded. That was all Barnaby could give him. The organization had trained the recruits to follow orders. Barnaby was asking them to think. The difference could save lives. The meeting with the political leader was approaching. Richard Longwood was already there. He appeared calm. He was confident. He believed that his plan was under control. He had money. He had influence.